Where were you born?
I'm a native Memphian, born here in Memphis, and lived in North Memphis all my life. The only time I was away from Memphis was 4.5 years in the service and 4 years at Notre Dame. And I enrolled in the Air Corps, Army Air Corps, 1941, right after Pearl Harbor, about 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. It was really January the 2nd or 3rd, somewhere around there. But wasn't shortly after that, I got my aerial gunner wings and was sent to Geiger Field, Spokane, Washington. That was the home base of the B-17 Flying Fortress. The Flying Fortress was a 4-engine bomber, and here it is at the top here. They made 12,500 of these planes in World War II at Seattle, Washington, at the Boeing plant, and they carried a 10-man crew. Up in the nose, you had the bombardier. Right at his elbow, the navigator. That's 2. Pilot and co-pilot, 3 and 4. Top turret engineer gunner is 5. Radio man is 6. Ball turret gunner is 7. Left and right waist gunners, 8 and 9. Tail gunner, 10. There's 10 men on each crew. And this plane had 4 engines. We carried 2,780 gallons of gas in the wings. We had 4 big wing tanks. Each engine on this plane took 50 gallons of gas an hour to fly. It took 200 gallons of gas an hour to fly this thing. We had a total flight time of a little over 10 and a half hours. We would carry 8,000 pounds of bombs. We would carry 16 500-pound bombs, 8 on each side of the Bombay. That we used those on industrial targets. When we were bombing submarine pens, those 500-pound bombs would bounce off like ping pong balls. Germans had about 25 to 30 feet of concrete above each submarine pen at the Wilhelmshaven and in that area on the Baltic. So we substituted 4 2,000-pound bombs when we bombed the submarine pens. And boy, they would really leave a hole in that concrete. We had 13 machine guns on board. Everybody had a machine gun except the pilot. And each gun had about 2,500 rounds of ammunition. Our guns would fire at a rate of 500 rounds a minute. This is a caliber 50 machine gun. So these are duds. They won't go off. I got this at an air show. And we had a range of 1,000 yards maximum. And this is what the Germans fired back at us. This is a 20 millimeter cannon shell. This is what the German planes, they had 2 of these on either side of the fuselage and a 50 calibers in the nose. These would have a range of 1,500 yards. So we had to let the German planes get in a little bit closer because we couldn't hit them at 1,500 yards. So they had a 500-yard advantage on us. Now this is a 20 millimeter shell. This would really do some damage if it hit you. My job was to protect the tail section and keep the German planes from attacking us from the rear. Most of the attacks in the early days came right from the 6 o'clock position. We used the nose of the plane, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock on the right, 6 o'clock on the nose at the tail, and 9 o'clock on the left. And I'm the only guy on the plane flying backwards. I didn't sit in the seat. I straddled a bicycle seat in the tail section of the plane and reared back on a bicycle seat and flew on my knees for 10 and a half hours. Scared all the time. But all my missions were to Germany. I only hit France 1 time. I hit Poland 1 time. I hit Berlin 6 times, Frankfurt 4 times, and all up and down the Ruhr Valley, Essen, Kassel, Dusseldorf, industrial targets. We bombed industrial targets. The British bombed at night. They bombed cities at night in retaliation for the tremendous damage they did to Coventry and East London during the Blitz. Now, we were different. We flew in the daytime. They flew at night. The British tried daylight bombing, but they couldn't keep their planes in formation. We flew real tight formation. In fact, one wing of one plane would be overlapping the wing of the other plane. That's how close we flew. And for protection and to keep the German fighters from penetrating, you know. I was only scheduled to fly 25 missions. That was the rule back in those days. After 25, you were rotated back to the States for further duty. But let me tell you about one mission over Germany. We were coming back from the target, And a whole, you see, a bunch of about half a dozen ME-109s came sweeping down on us and did quite a bit of damage to the plane. In fact, the co-pilot was killed. He weighed about 220 pounds, and the pilot was weighed about 160. And when the co-pilot fell across the controls, we were at 28,500 then. The plane went into a dive, and before they could pull the injured man, the dead man off the controls, we went from 28,500 to 1,500 feet, and we stretched him out in the radio room. And then the engineer came down and took over the co-pilot seat. So we came across Germany, less than 1,000 feet. And the bombardier said, or the navigator says, you guys want to try to reach a group 30,000 feet? No, it'd take too much gas and would be too much of a target by ourselves. So let's just hedge hop across Germany till we get to the English Channel. And here's my crew picture right here. This man was killed, bombardier was killed, and this man was killed. So we lost 3 men of our crew killed at different times. And I remember one time we were flying so close together, the plane above us, I was here, and the man above us was like this, and I was in the tail position, and we were taking a lot of fighter attacks and a lot of anti-aircraft. We call it ACAC. And I bowed my head and said a little prayer to myself. And I looked up, the pilot put his hand up like this, "Okay, buddy, everything's going to be okay." And just as he did that, a burst of flak hit in the cockpit and the whole plane blew up. I dream of that every so often.
You still dream of it?
I have very few. I have more dreams now about people beating me out of my paper route money when I was a teenager.
And what was it like right before a mission, the night before?
Nervous as hell. You didn't know where you were going until they unzipped. They took the map at briefing that next morning. Like on March the 6th, we always thought of Big B. That was Berlin. When will we hit Big B? And we always hit all around it, but never hit Berlin itself, you know. So finally here they unveiled the map on the wall, and there was the route going in and out from Berlin. And the briefing officer brought the major up there, and he says, "Here are the defenses around the target." And he says, 150, and he sat down. And someone from the audience jumped up and says, 150 what, Major? Batteries or guns? He says, batteries. And the next one, how many guns in a German battery? He says, 4. It didn't take long to multiply 4 by 150. They surrounded the target with anti-aircraft guns. And they knew we were heading for that ball bearing factory, and they just shot a constant barrage right over the target without any planes in the area. And we had to fly through that barrage to let our bombs go. That's when we lost 69 bombers that afternoon.
Oh, that was the time.
That's the highest rate. They said the ball bearings were pretty important in the oil refineries. If we could knock out the ball bearings in the oil refineries, it would really hamper the Germans, especially the submarine pens, where they were repairing the German submarines, you know. Well, I had packed my bags at 25, ready to get rotated back to the States, and here comes a runner from headquarters, a corporal. His commanding officer wants to see you. And the CO says, "Sergeant, with Charlotte planes and crews, you're going to fly 4 more missions," so that made 29. And all you do is salute, "Yes, sir." So after I did my 29, here comes that corporal, says, "Commanding officer wants to see you." I go in, he says, "I hate to tell you this, Sergeant, but you got to do 6 more missions. We're short on planes and crews. We're short on tail gunners." And you just cuss under your breath and say, "Yes, sir." So that made 35. And 3 of the last 6 were to Berlin, which was no picnic. And after I did 35, here comes this corporal from headquarters. I looked through the little window in the Nielsen hut and said, "Oh, heck, I bet he's got more bad news." He said, "Commanding officer wants to see you." So I come charging into operations and bust through the screen door and nearly knocked him out as a sergeant on his butt. He was by the filing cabinet and I run up to the desk. Don't salute or anything. I start squawking. I said, "Come on, Colonel, have a heart, man. What you trying to do, kill me? I've done 35. Holy mackerel, man, let me go home." And he said, sit down, Sergeant. Calm down. You're not going home. You're not flying any more missions, but you're not going home. I said, what's the story there, sir? And he says, you have been picked on a select crew from the whole 8th Air Force on a special assignment. I said, what's the nature of the assignment, sir? He said, I'm not at liberty to disclose that to you at this time. Fall out at 06:30 in the morning in full flying gear in your position on the plane. And we got there. I met the other 9 men from the pit crew from the whole 8th Air Force. The pilot was a colonel, the co-pilot was lieutenant colonel, and the bombardier and navigator were majors. There's a lot of rank there. A notice appeared on the bulletin board. All men assigned to Special Flight 484, whatever the number was, fall out at 04:30 in the morning in full flying gear alongside your plane. And it'd be the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, all the way down, and I'm the last guy in line, the tail gunner. So here comes a staff car driving up with a motorcycle escort. It's still pre-dawn. You can't see who's getting out of the back seat. The VIP in the back seat gets out, starts walking briskly to the head of the line, takes his hat off, tucks it under his left arm, extends his right hand in greeting. He says, good morning, gentlemen. He says, my name is Eisenhower. So then the cat was out of the bag. I was attached to Supreme Headquarters in London, flying Eisenhower. D-Day was June the 6th. And I took off at 4:30 in the morning with 4 generals on board and a crew of 10. And we were escorted by 5 P-51 fighter planes. And we flew over the beachhead about 2,500 feet, circling the beachhead. And I was in the tail taking movies for the Signal Corps of the invasion, 4:30 in the morning. And I was over the beachhead 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours again in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. So I was over the Normandy beachhead on invasion day for 4 hours. And it was quite a sight. Then I was rotated back to the States and became a gunnery instructor. And I was discharged in December 1945 at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. A big band was out there playing the Air Force song, and the general just hand you your discharge and your salute and didn't say a word. But when I came up to the platform, he said, congratulations, here's your discharge. He says, how long were you in the service, Sergeant? I said, 4 years, sir. He says, what did you learn in the service? It caught me off guard. And I said, sir, I learned how to get along with all different types of people. He says, that's a good answer. Best of luck to you.
So what's the first picture in your mind that you can see when you first arrive on campus?
The Golden Dome.
Tell me about that.
That was so significant. It stood out you could see it for way distance away, you know. Let me tell you a strange story. There used to be a bus stop downtown South Bend. The bus stopped on that corner and took you to Notre Dame. And it was sleeting and snowing, awfully cold. And it was my senior year as a journalism student. And we had to write a long term paper, a very difficult term paper to get our degree. And I was on this corner, it was sleeting, and there was a bar right behind me. I went into this bar to get a beer, a little 15-cent glass of beer, no bigger than that. And there's an old timer at the far end of the bar. This is about 11 o'clock in the morning. He had a big overcoat on, and it looked like about shivering to death, and he was sipping his beer. And I told the bartender, draw another beer and send it down to the old timer at the end of the bar. And he said, thank you very much, gave his hand. And after a while, he motioned for me to come on down. And I went down there. He said, son, I want to thank you for the beer. He says, appreciate it. He said, you're more than welcome. And he undid his overcoat and took out a whole roll of parchment paper and laid them on top of the counter there. And it was pictures of a steamboat. And he told me the story. He was reminiscing about his days as a captain of the last of the steamboat that used to go from Chicago across Lake Michigan up the St. Joe River every weekend, carrying visitors, to St. Joe, and turn around at St. Joe and come back down. And the name of his ship was the May Graham. I said, sir, I'm a journalism at the university, and I'd like to interview you. And he lived in Coldwater, Michigan. And I borrowed my radio man's car and drove to Coldwater and got a great interview with him. And I took the interview to Mr. Miller, who was editor of the South Bend Tribune. And he was very noncommittal. And he had an inbox and an outbox. And he took that manila envelope and tossed it in the inbox and says, if this is any good, you'll hear from us. Thanks for coming by. That's all he said. And 3 weeks went by, and I was due for this term paper, and I started working on this term paper. The term paper was the value of mental institutions. That was the name of the term paper, nature of it. And holy mackerel, on first page, second section of the South Bend Tribune on a Sunday, here was my story, complete with pictures. They published my story plus 3 pictures of this story I wrote. Cruising Down the River on the Meg Graham was the headline. And that was the name of the song that was popular back in those days. And Dean Stritch, the head of journalism, said, I saw your story in the paper yesterday. You did a great job. You don't have to write anything for me. He said, you did a tremendous job. He said, Mr. Miller would like to see you in his office. So I take some time off, go up to the editor's office, and I thought he'd just hand me back my manila folder. He handed me a check for $500. $500. He said, would you like to make more money on this story? Yes, sir, I would. He said, here's a card. Take it to this man. He's the CEO of the Northern Indiana Historical Society. He'd like to have this story. He gave me $250. And he says, I have a man that edits a Riverboat magazine. Contact him. I got $150 from them. So now, all in all, I got $900 from buying a man a 15-cent glass of beer.
And what did you do after Notre Dame?
The first job I had was with Channel 5 here in Memphis. It was called WMCT, and I was news editor, news director. And I spent almost 9 years there at Channel. We were 3rd and Madison at the old Goodwin Institute building. Our studios were underground. When I was in television and radio, I worked 3 p.m. to midnight, 6 days a week, including Sunday. The only day I had off was Saturday. And my family was growing up while I was at work. When my boys were in school, I would be in bed and vice versa, you know. And that's the only reason I got out of broadcasting, because of the hours, you see.
What's the best thing for you about being a dad?
Being a what?
Being a father. What's the best thing about it?
The boys' accomplishments. Mm-hmm. My oldest son is a deacon at St. Peter's Catholic Church. He's also a chaplain at Ave Maria Home. My boy that died, David, was in the advertising business for Colored Ink. He made Colored Ink for different companies. And my youngest son is in the mortgage loan business here in Memphis.
When you go back and visit like that, what goes through your mind about being a student at Notre Dame and what Notre Dame did for you?
Well, I appreciate the education I got, and it made me appreciate the love for my religion and love of country. Well, my father was very religious. He went to church every day. He went to Mass and Communion every morning every day before we went to school. And he was also was Catholic. Was the Catholic club in existence when you came here?
Yeah.
He was general manager of the Catholic club, and also secretary of the Knights of Columbus. And I joined the Knights of Columbus. And I'm also, as you know, with you, I'm with the Notre Dame Club and on the board of directors. I'm also on the board of directors of the Christian Brothers High School here in Memphis. I'm president of the Sears Retirees Club here in Memphis.
Oh, are you?
And I'm also on the board of directors of the Memphis Bell Association. And despite my handicap, I still attend all these meetings. Friends of mine come by, George Moore in particular, and pick me up in my collapsible wheelchair and get me to the meeting.
Bob, as you go back over your life and think about it, what are you most proud of?
2 things, my family and my Notre Dame education. Well, it was tough to achieve, and secondly, I worked my way through college. The GI Bill of Rights only paid $500 no matter where you went to school.
What would you tell a young college student at Notre Dame today as they face the challenges of school? And
stick to the books first, and any extracurricular activities secondly. Now, I participated in the inter-hall basketball. I was on the bowling squad, and I played handball. That's where I initiated handball. And speaking of handball, I took it up in 1961 here in Memphis and played it for 42 years. Retired in 2003. I put in 42 years of playing handball 3 times a week. The only reason I gave it up, all my partners are all crippled with arthritis and so forth, and the younger guys didn't want to get beat by an old timer.
So who do you write to now when you write letters?
My Notre Dame buddies, my Army buddies, I got 2-3 there, and 2-3 Notre Dame buddies I keep in close contact with.
They're still alive and kicking, those
Oh, yeah.
Notre Dame guys?
Mm-hmm.
What haven't you told me about that you would like to tell me about?
Oh, it's hard to say. I'm just thankful I'm still alive at the age of 86. But I get around pretty good in my wheelchair.
Think about your grandson for a minute, and as you look at a picture of him in your mind's eye, 25, 30 years from now, how would you like him to remember you?
He's a pretty tough old critter.
And what would you like him to remember most about you?
About how good I was to my son.